Hello dear viewers, I'm George from Ireland. I'm on Portobello Road in London. So Portobello Road, it runs through the Notting Hill area, and it's famous for Portobello Market and indeed the Notting Hill Carnival, which takes out over this area on August Bank Holiday. Been doing so since 1959. So it's well known for the worlds of entertainment. Bohemian artsy people would hang around here, and indeed it was a significant moment in British television history that took place very close to here. You can't quite see it. We're looking that direction, just out of sight. There is a skateboarding place. I don't know what to call it, a half pipe and a quarter pipe and things like that. I'm not a skater, as you may have deduced. Anyhow, there was a young man called Sacha Baron Cohen in about 1998 who was struggling to make it as a television presenter and a male model. And he interviewed some teenage skateboarders and their various ethnic groups. Now, he's a white Jewish guy, public school boy, who'd graduated from Cambridge University not long before, very upper middle class, but he began speaking to them in their own patois, Jafaican, as in fake Jamaican. There was this trend in the late 90s, early noughties, for people who had even those who were not black or had no Caribbean ancestry, whites or South Asians, to speak in this attempt at a West Indian accent, and they perhaps thought it gave them more machismo and things like that, street cred, and so then he fell into this lingo, and he thought that they realised he was taking the mick and might be mildly affronted, but they didn't, and at that moment he realised he'd struck comedy gold. They thought he was completely authentic, and in that moment the character of Ali G was born, where he assumed the persona of a teenage delinquent from Staines, which is the most middle class town in Britain, just to the west of London at Heathrow Airport. Someone who is bourgeois but desperately trying to, use covert prestige, to be more proletarian, to seem like a petty criminal, things like that. Anyway, enough about Ali G. So, street entertainment here, there's going to be some street food here, some live music. Now the festival isn't for over 3 weeks, August Bank Holiday, but you see they have live music here outside, which is why they had to keep the rain off rather than the sun mostly. And there's all sorts of cuisine from different parts of the world, quite close to Westbourne Studios, which is a television recording studios, but various businesses, if they're very .com, they would have their offices there. So you can see a Malaysian restaurant, and overhead is the main motorway coming in from the west, and the tube has just gone by. So Portobello. So I'll tell you why it's called Portobello. That's because obviously 1739 there was the War of Austrian Succession, if memory serves, and the United Kingdom was war against Spain, and the Royal Navy attacked Portobello, a town on the coast of Panama, as in Spanish territory, and sacked it, pillaged it. What a glorious act, and carried this off. It wasn't brigandage because it was lawful, and that was that. And in honour of that famous victory, it's called Portobello Road. There's a Portobello Road in Dublin, and indeed in Edinburgh. Look at this. So some left-wingery here. Aid to Spain, memories of the Spanish Civil War, no pasarán, they shall not pass. Dolores Ibarruri, the communist politician, that was her motto. La Pasionara, the passionate one. She went off to Moscow and she failed. Actually, she was simply reusing a French slogan from the First World War, the Battle of Verdun. Ils ne passeront pas. Alright, so under the tube line, this is the Hammersmith and City line going overhead. We're not far from Grenfell Tower, where there was that horrific fire in 2017, just after the general election. Over 100 people perished. So Portobello Road, this was a farm area until 1739, and that's why you'll see these narrow twisting lanes around here. Now there are obviously some much more modern buildings, but the oldest buildings here would date from 1739, apart from a few of the churches, because this was outside the country. This is Middlesex, the county of Middlesex. This is not part of London at all back then. So a lot of street food to be eaten. If you're feeling short on calories, get some of those donuts. And here you can send money all over the world. A public convenience we're about to see. Quite rare to see a public lavatorium. So sometimes in London you'd swear people got nothing to do but eat and drink, where there are plenty of eateries and there are plenty of public houses. So Claudia Jones lived around here. Claudia Jones was born in one of the British colonies in the Caribbean. I forget which island, I'm afraid. She didn't have any tertiary education, but she was a woman of enormous eloquence and erudition. So she moved to the United States, where she began to agitate in the Marxist cause, and she wrote for many left-wing journals. And it was the era of McCarthyism, and the US authorities did not take kindly to that. She never became an American citizen. Anyway, she was deported, so she decided not to return to her homeland, but to come to the United Kingdom in the mid-1950s. And because of the laws on Commonwealth immigration, it was come one, come all, and she had absolutely no difficulty settling here. She was legally permitted to settle here. So this was not such a she area back then. It'd been quite smart in the late 19th century, by which time it really built up. Just after the Second World War, often it was falling into rack and ruin. Some of these houses were unoccupied, and there was a guy called Peter Rackman, the aptly named Rackman, nominative determinism, who was notorious for rack renting. So there was a law about sitting tenants. If there were sitting tenants, the rents couldn't go up. So what he would do is he'd get his gang to create noise and nuisance and hassle these elderly tenants into leaving, and therefore he was allowed to put up the rents as high as he wanted. And a lot of black Caribbean people started coming to this country shortly after the Second World War, 1948. SS Empire Windrush. 1/3 of those on the SS Empire Windrush had formerly served in the British Armed Forces, in the Royal Navy, or the RAF in the British Army. But despite that, they often faced the most scandalous bigotry and discrimination in housing and employment. People putting up houses saying no blacks, signs in their houses, no blacks, and they wouldn't rent rooms to black people. Occasionally, apparently, there was no Irish, and none of my relatives ever saw one of those, but I did meet an elderly Englishman who told me he did see one of those. But anyway, black people had it far worse than Irish people here. But this was not an expensive area, and Rackman was willing to rent out to black people, but he exploited them because he realised they had little choice, so he was charging them well over the odds for substandard accommodation, and several people sharing a single bedroom. And so around here, the Notting Hill area became quite a big black Caribbean area. See wines of Spain, see some of the things they're selling here. But anyway, back to the black Caribbean community in this country. The Notting Hill race riots, so some of the local whites were white supremacists, and they gave the black community a very hard time. There were physical attacks on them. A young man was murdered not a mile from here in the 1950s. I forget his name, actually. It's really close to the Trevithick Tower. He's sort of an early day Stephen Lawrence. There is a plaque when that young man fell a victim to racism. But anyway, what's next? So Claudia Jones was here, and she said, well, let's organise something positive. Sir Oswald Mosley had reared his ugly head. He was against immigration, yet he'd gone to live in Paris, being a neighbour and a dinner partner of the Duke of Windsor, former King Edward VIII. Anyway, Sir Oswald came back here and campaigned in the what was called the Kensington North by-election. He had his new political party called the Union Movement, which didn't want any non-white people in the country, and said it was because of whatever, trade imbalance. He said he didn't dislike them personally, well, some of his relatives certainly did. But anyway, he got about 8% of the vote. That was the last time he attempted to get elected anywhere. And it was onto Europe a Nation. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, Remainers. The British Nazi leader was an ardent Europhile. Anyway, so Claudia Jones said, well, let's take this negativity, this animus towards our community, and we're going to turn this into something positive. Let's have a festival to celebrate all that's fantastic about black Caribbean culture. So the Notting Hill Carnival was born. There was some sort of street party first of all, but 1959 it began in earnest around here. And it's been going to this day, but it's a huge thing. It's the largest celebration of Caribbean culture outside the Caribbean. Anyway, you can see this place is a bit of a flea market. All the bags, all the clothes you can buy, and then a lot of sort of tourist kitsch, which I would not recommend because it tends to be rubbishy quality. And so a lot of tourists come along here. It's a little bit bohemian, it's a bit alternative, and some adolescents particularly like hanging out here. So it pleases the way there's almost nothing more than 4 stories high. So loads of pubs and things like that, and there are a few high street chains, but most of these are actually fairly small independent businesses, which makes the place is variegated. You know, the streetscape is not just as samey as one sees in so many other places. But as I say, it was a very affordable place to live in the 1950s, but nowadays it couldn't be more different. I'm not just talking strictly about this street, about Portobello Road, I'm talking about the Notting Hill area in general. And there really is a hill of Notting Hill, which is, oh my goodness, you can't see it from this angle, but it'll be that away, about half a mile. Rises fairly steeply. So gradually it gentrified and got more and more expensive. And by the 90s, this was where bankers lived. So, you know, you're looking at, say, at least £200,000 per bedroom here. The most expensive London properties are something staggering, like £10,000 per square metre. It's not quite that bad on Portobello Road. So Greg's, again, if you feel you're anorexic, you might want to put some calories in there. They used to do 4 for the price of 3 on what they call sausage rolls. That was almost the death of me. Okay, so you'll see some of the rags they're selling in there. Come here for your threads. Okay, so more touristico kitsch. If you want to prove you've been here, buy one of these things. An Oxford University or a Cambridge University thing, whatever it is, a London cap. Okay, so I think these beasts have not given their lives in vain for a carnival like me. All right, so there you are. Let's go, girls. How about that for glamour, tough, chic, chic? So they're selling bric-a-brac household items placed across the waist, all those little step ladders, and my goodness, buckets, things for you put your mop in. All right. Things with myriad household uses. What do we call all this sort of stuff? I don't really know. So it's not all she, but it's a bit like an upmarket version of Camden Market, if you've heard of Camden Market. Camden Market is, well, on the canal, on Regent's Canal, a few miles to the east of here, and it's selling this sort of stuff, but cheaper, and it's a bit edgier, shall we say. Always get approached there by people trying to sell me drugs. It's a small gated community there, so it can be quite plush. I like the way they're painted in these gay colours. Not that kind of gay. Snappy snaps. I'm surprised they got much of a market, because we know doing these things online for ourselves, you know, downloading onto computers. But in the noughties, they still had some big business. And look at this. Look at all they're selling here. These brightly coloured waistcoats and such like. So you must come and see it for yourself. Take home some things you really don't need. Oh, right, vegetarian meals. My God, there'll be wind in the pillows after that one. So yeah, if you had any of those bean paste things, you're not coming anywhere near me, I can tell you. All right, you're smelling like a cat. And just a little supermarket behind, so nothing special. An eatery that actually does use the name eatery. Cakes and whatnot. Makes me peckish. Now, as a charity shop, you don't usually see Greater London Fund for the Blind, which is quite ironic because the blind can't actually read the sign. They ought to have it in Braille, come on. And you can donate into this statue here, into the top of his head. So charity shops. Now, I know I have many viewers from overseas who may not have these things, so people donate their second-hand knickknacks, clothes, books, shoes, whatever it is, and they're sold on very affordably, so low-income people can buy the things they need, and any profit is then given to this worthy cause, in this case, those whose eyes are dim and cannot see. Some could be partially sighted. They don't define it that strictly. Okay, so there's Tesco, set up by Mr. Cohen, as in the Co is from his surname, Cohen, as in father of Dame Shirley Porter, the Conservative politician of the Westminster Homes for Vote scandals. But don't let you put you off. It's a rather down-market supermarket, but it does the trick. Okay, so then there's Tuk Tuk. This Indian restaurant's gone bust. Tuk Tuk being one of those glorified motorbikes with a broad seat on the back to take a few passengers, such as infest the roads of Bangkok. And look at all this. Would this count as jewellery? Okay, objet d'art, images of Buddha, opium pipes. No, they don't sell you any brown to put in it. And what's up here? Love Hate Social Club. Well, it seems like more hate than love. The place has gone bust. Uninspiring, hey? Okay, so there's some artisanal crepe behind. That's pancake to you and me. Why on earth can't they call it that? What was the difference between a pancake and a crepe? I mean, we are speaking English here. All right, so more clothes. Are they just really rubbishy quality, or are they second-hand? I mean, why are they selling for £2 in some cases? £1? My God, you can't say fairer than that. And then lovely Britannia. And there's a South Asian people usually selling these things. So, don't let it be said that the Union flag is a symbol of white supremacists, because they're usually South Asians in these shops selling all these flags and T-shirts and whatnot. Okay, so there's Starbucks coffee behind, and there are the flags across the street. They don't always have them across the street. So Saturday's a big day for selling furniture here. It wasn't always thus. In the 1920s, it turned this way. George Orwell was living here in the 1930s. I might locate his house. And of course, it's a curious irony that there's a video camera on his house, CCTV on his house. That away in the background, perhaps you can see the green heart high up on Grenfell Tower. but that deserves a video in its own right. Right, crossing over here, you're getting an idea of what Portobello Road is all like. It's getting more upmarket in this direction. Okay, the castle and ale house, and there's a cafe over on the other side. So many languages are spoken here. If the wind changes, you might even hear English. Not that I'm a complete xenophile and a polyglot, so I don't say that in a snide way. All right, so these people running their little stalls, selling their vegetables and snacks. Okay, cross over, take my life in my hands. Here we are. There are lots of tourists gawping at the sights. So there'll be live music in some of these places, some of these pubs. Right, but you know, on a winter's morning, it wouldn't be quite so busy. We are about the busiest time of year. So at least it's not like Oxford Street, it's not packed. You're not going to be rammed down by a phalanx of tourists approaching you. Okay, crossover. Cool Portobello, well that's what it's all about. But you know, the same tourist souvenirs you've seen in 1,000 other places. And here is, oh yeah, Group 4 security, cash in transit. I don't mind if I do, I help myself if I could. But they've got no access to the money inside, and it's covered in these, it's in these pallets with smart water. If you break it open, this water would spray onto you, your clothes and your skin, it doesn't wash off. And it's got a chemical fingerprint, so they can link you to the crime. They can prove that you, your skin, your clothes were there when those banknotes were stolen. I think it's linked to the individual pallet, because of the chemical they put in the water, so-called smart water, or else a dye which sprays onto the banknotes purple. And they're still legal tender, but people say, hey, what's that? Might not want to accept it, and certainly it'll be noticed if they're soaked purple and it doesn't wash out. Okay, here's a pharmacy, drugstore if you're American. They don't sell actual drugs, drugstores. I know you'll be bitterly disappointed. Okay. So meditation accessories, well, just what I've always needed. And then another business gone bust. You know, they say the internet's killing the high street. People are online shopping so much. But they can turn it into housing, is what we need. But I think we ought to make London unaffordable, because then there's just more people using public transport. We ought to get people to move out. Poundland, everything's £1. Okay, keep costs down. Brown rice, very difficult to find brown rice. I ought to have some, clean out my insides. So now some of this is fairly bland, this little shoe shop here. Then you get the idea Sainsbury's, which is not quite as dreadful a supermarket as Tesco. Costs a little bit more. And then on to the Salvation Army is here. Salvation Army, in case you don't know this, that's a church, it's not an army. So it's a Christian group, and they're founded in the 19th century by William Booth, who was a collateral ancestor of Cherie Blair, wife of Tony Blair. Don't let that put you off, okay? So if you join the Salvation Army, you're called a soldier. Anyone who can attend the church, if you decide to join them as such, you're a soldier of the Salvation Army. And they used to wear these military-style uniforms. Now it's more like t-shirts and baseball caps. But they're against alcohol and drugs, and they try and help people, ne'er-do-wells, down and outs, get off the streets and reject drugs, prostitution, gambling. Must have no addictions. So that's it. Look up Matthew Robert Payne, a soldier of the Salvation Army. I met him in Australia, bizarrely, and he's an internet preacher. Helped him overcome his addiction to ladies of the night. Okay, so here they are, selling more curious clothes in all sorts of weird and wonderful colours, lacy items. That might tickle your fancy. And by the way, if millinery is your confection, then you're in for a treat, because there's a place that sells all sorts of it coming up here. The distillery. Do they really have a distillery, this pub here? Okay, so that's one of the largest establishments on famous Portobello Road. So not too many cars here, I'm pleased to say. A Chelsea tractor, there we are. Remember 2007, people were always bitching about these unnecessarily big cars designed for the countryside going around Chelsea, this very upper middle class part of London, delivering children to school. Was that just envy? Some people can afford a four-wheel drive, but I can't, so we hate them, because saying we should tax them more. Well, wait a second, it costs more to fill it up because it needs more petrol because it's a heavy car, so they're being taxed more anyway. Say, oh, tax them even more than that. Maybe that, as I say, it's just sheer jealousy and class warfare. All right, now people say, oh, they want to have spray on mud, these people with Chelsea tractors, because they want to pretend that they're countryside people and the Green Wellies Brigade, but really they're not. So they're faking it. Completely unnecessary in a city, but it doesn't really take up much more road space than an ordinary car. Okay, House of Vapes. I'm not a vapist. Don't take that the wrong way. So crossing over here is almost pedestrian. Okay, so all your floral needs can be met around here. No, not with the mural behind, but the things they have on display there. Okay, and my goodness, every conceivable type of tea and coffee and all the necessary accoutrements are for sale there. Okay, so we're about to see a greengrocer. It's not a word one uses very often, but he's only got a stall, not an actual shop. How to pay for the pitch, coffee plant, an independent coffee house, that's a rarity these days. And then some other bloke is selling falafel and all the rest of it.
I'm having dinner with
Not my bag, actually. Okay.
I know.
All right. So here's
You lead the way, Nina.
Gelateria, which is ice cream, of course. From the Italian one for frozen. How's that different from ice cream? I don't know. Okay, hats. Okay, you will not be disappointed. And this is just the very beginning. Baseball caps, all sorts of hats, men's hats, women's hats, toppers. You know, Sherlock Holmes, the deerstalker, the flat caps. Is it symbol of the working class, or is it kind of a posh thing to say if you're on a thing to wear if you're on a grouse walk? Panama hats, absolutely de rigueur if you're a clergyman of the Anglican denomination. Okay, now we're getting really Portobello Road. How about that? For kinky boots, okay? Thigh-high black PVC boots. Don't mind if I do. Rings my bell. And all these skirts, all these baseball boots and things like that. All right, this is what you came for. And it's sort of a theme tune going. See what I mean? Okay, so come and shop here. She doesn't wear those boots, I can tell you. And all sorts of London trinkets, key rings, fridge magnets, pens. If you're a real tightwad, just buy that as a souvenir for somebody. And more vegetables. Electric cinema. Well, come on, also cinemas are electric. Pilones selling all sorts of toys. Here we go. Thank you. And moving on, I think fruit. You don't really need to see what that is. Oxfam, as in Oxford Famine Relief. Well, it was in the Second World War. Something like that was founded to feed the famished in various parts of Europe. But then in 1947 it was founded as Oxfam as such. The Oxford Committee for Famine Relief on Broad Street in Oxford, the original shop of it still stands. It's a charity shop. Okay, so here we are. See what I'm talking about? Are these things second-hand? I don't know. They're dirt cheap, these rather amorphous dresses. So if you've got no shape, that might hide you. And there's Cafe Nero. I'm a sucker for their loyalty cards. They've now got electronic loyalty cards. If you bring your own cup, they give you an extra stamp. 9 stamps, you get a free drink. Only your hot basic counts. Okay, London family, there you are. More things to see and buy. British Red Cross, another charity shop. So it's difficult for ordinary businesses. How do they compete with free stock? Okay, leather goods shop. There you are. So it became very popular in the 60s with mods and rockers, you know, so rockers going around in black leathers and boots and motorbikes. Maybe were they more working class, were they more manly, something like that, greasing their hair back. A bit like bikers in the United States, maybe more into tattoos, beards, piercings. And then there were mods. Mods were perhaps more middle class, definitely clean shaven, tidier, more effete, wearing bodgy jackets, things like that, suede shoes, things like that, going around on scooters rather than motorbikes. Okay, so those were the two youth subcultures, sometimes clashing, fighting each other. Wearing parkas, mods were. You might have seen that film, 1979 film Quadrophenia, as in 4 insanities. So Quadrophenia came out in 1979, but it's looking back to the early 60s. There was some time in 1962 when there was a long weekend where in some seaside town, was it Brighton, hundreds of mods and rockers gathered and they had fisticuffs. The fight wasn't that bad, nobody got killed, blah, blah, blah. But there's a bit of a moral panic. You should read Stanley Cohen about this, about how it was a slow news weekend and the media blew it out of all proportion, pretended it was some sort of existential peril to the kingdom. But anyway, the 60s, this became a very trendy place to hang out if you were fashion conscious, as I wouldn't have been. So watch that Quadrophenia, fantastic, starring the 19-year-old Leslie Ash. Sting was in it, had a bit part. Okay, so anyway, yeah, we can see more of these clothes. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Very bright, unusual, influenced by other cultures. I don't know what to say. I've got Holland and Barrett for all your vitamin supplements over there. Turmeric does it for me. It's a natural anti-inflammatory. You find a lot of Indian foods. Five Guys is not bad for a burger joint, actually. Okay, so more hats in case you missed these. Leather caps if you're a sadist. Yeah. Just so people know what you're about. And men's hats, women's hats, you know, top hats, black and brown, bowler hats, and then these ones, I suppose, sun visors, what else would you call them, and all sorts of bags, okay? And now, if you want to buy a handbag for the price of a house, this is where you want to look. Right. So, I said there's some expensive houses. Have a look at these ones. And there'll be big gardens out back. So in the time of Peter Rackman, we split up into several different flats. As there had been upper middle class residences in the late 19th century, but by the 50s it was a very down at heel area, and these places were falling apart, rat infested. You know, no upgrade for years, no heating, didn't always have running water, often had an outside lavatory in the garden, blah blah blah. Obviously, it's improved radically since then, and some poor, underpaid, exploited people had no alternative but to live there. Okay, so more and more you'll get what I'm talking about. It's getting a bit samey, hey, you get the idea. Now how about this? Hatter and Taylor. That'd be a feather in your cap.
No.
It's going to be Scottish, all this tweedy stuff. Handmade in England, okay. English or Scots, I don't know. Is there a difference? Anyway, so come for the antique furniture on Saturday. There's antique clothing at other times, it would seem to me. So it was a fairly ordinary street till I think it's the 1930s. Susan Garth, she opened up her bric-a-brac shop, and it all followed from there. It's perhaps not as unique as it used to be, partly because there are other places doing something similar, and indeed this place has gone a little bit corporate, a bit too much like an ordinary high street. So Notting Hill, I went to Notting Hill and got this bag, okay, or my friend got me only this lousy present from Notting Hill. They should have done way better. There is Julia Roberts in the Notting Hill film, which came out in 1999, starring Hugh Grant. My word, it's 20 years ago. And there's Dylan Morris, the Irish comedian's got a bit part trying to nick some books. There's that bloke Dreyfus, I can't remember, that old Arabian actor chap who's supposedly running the bookshop, Rhys Ifans. It was sort of his breakout role as Hugh Grant's onanistic Welsh housemate, who mentions it to a few people down the pub that he's having a liaison, that Hugh Grant's having a romantic relationship with this Hollywood starlet. And Richard Curtis wrote it saying, imagine if the most famous actress in the world came to dinner right now, and it was Madonna when he conceived the film. So you can tell this has dated that film, because there's no way these days someone who owned a second-hand bookshop could afford to live here. There we are. There are quite a few second-hand bookshops, but they're charity shops. People are largely volunteering there, working for free. So jolly, jolly London. How nice. Okay, so yet more hats. Hats and hats and hats and hats. Hardly anybody wears a hat these days, but you go back to the 60s, people feel almost naked to step out the door without a hat. Rings and jewellery of sorts. Okay, crockery and cutlery and porcelain images of little hounds. Bags of all sorts. So yet more antiques. So there's antiques everything during the week, antiques furniture usually Saturday, and some rather bland housing on the other side. Oh, yet more pancakes back there by means of sustenance. All right. And what's that up here? Which a hummingbird, colibri in every language except English. What's so special about it? Only bird that can fly backwards, or indeed hover, where it gave us the idea for the helicopter. Who invented it? The Romanians claim Aurel Vlaicu, but certainly the Germans had a sort of functioning one by the Second World War. Okay, these Oriental ladies posing for a photo. I scared them off, looks like. The Blue Door, what's all that about? Oh, a London bus. A London bus, a baby-sized London bus, hey? Okay, look at all these little handbags. Indian-inspired, looks like to me. And yet more tourist kitsch. And yet more hats. Okay? Gets to be much of a muchness after a while. So I don't come to Notting Hill, well, the Notting Hill area over much, particularly not to Portobello Road. But there comes a stage in one's life around the age of 15 when you might think this is in Aladdin's cave. especially, you know, if you've got a disposable income and you want to decorate your room in a way guaranteed to irritate your tediously staid parents. There we are. Okay. Well, there's nothing on both sides here. Quite a few window boxes, as in boxes of flowers in the window. Watch out, they're a danger to public health, can fall and injure people. And plenty of Singer sewing machines. Never used one myself, I'm proud to say. Okay, we're passing all over a street called Westbourne Row because there's a lost river of London, now underground, called the Westbourne. That's why we're at the W11 area, because these postcodes in London, you can navigate by them. There's a W standing for West, West 1, West 2, West 3, and so on. We're West 11, so just enter that into your Google Earth thing to find your way, or let a taxi driver know where you are. They really need that because there's some streets with the same name or else so similar you could easily get confused. But there's just one letter difference. The Earl of Lonsdale, another licensed establishment. So anyway, I'm getting a bit bored of it, are you? Okay, so more furniture. This end of the street is more permanent furniture shops rather than the actually on the street selling the stuff. Highland store, there were a few hundred miles from the Highlands, as in northern Scotland. Always banging on about Highlanders, but very few Scots people are Highlanders. A bit like being a jackaroo in Australia. Hello there. I'm making him famous. Free advertising. Or indeed, let's say, being a cowboy in the United States. Almost nobody's a cowboy, but some sort of archetype of the country. Same would go for Argentina, Hungary, wherever. Okay. What is going on up there? Oh, it's an eye. I thought it was a complete mess. It's artistic. Okay. Same old, same old. We've seen it all before. But look how brightly coloured they are. How variegated. Does it for me. What do you think? So there was a car purring by. You may notice the vehicles are rather quiet here because a lot of them are electric or indeed hybrid, as in they use electricity up to about 30 miles an hour and they use petrol beyond that. See more antiques, furniture over there, porcelain, amphora, little statues. Can't make it out from in the window quite so well. And they're going to see a big goat wearing some sort of college scarf. Not a real one, I'm afraid. Okay, if you want to spoil your children with overpriced old toys and stuffed animals, there we go. Yeah, wouldn't be for me. Ooh, musical instruments by appointment to Queen Victoria. And who's that? Is that Louis Armstrong? Satchmo, my word. The velvet-voiced bard of New Orleans. Senator David Norris in Ireland is an outspoken fan of his. And look at all this wooden stuff and a royal coat of arms. My goodness, some bloke getting going with a drill there. That is obviously one mean-spirited dentist. And then all sorts of doorknobs. Odd. A shop devoted to doorknobs. Why wouldn't you just buy the whole door? Tiny cricket balls and whatnot there. Do you see them? Well, these vans are obscuring that, but you know, it's the sort of junk you've seen everywhere else. Oh, antique sporting equipment and bags. Footballs and cricket bats and rugby balls and so on. Everything I'd never needed. So this is almost the end of Portobello Road. I mean, there is a very narrow street dead ahead, which I don't know if that counts as an extension, but Portobello Road. But this will be absolutely jam-packed for those 3 days of the Notting Hill Carnival, one of which is the Children's Day. There'll be people doing sort of samba dances, people walking on stilts, a bit like Junkanoo in the Bahamas, or a bit like Carnival in Rio. There was a sort of annex of the Ukrainian embassy up around the corner. I remember when I was here, and when was it, about 2005, greeting some of the guys, there were two Ukrainian guys there standing on the thing that didn't get ransacked. So a lot of the very well-to-do people who live around here, they are out of here in August Bank Holiday weekend. They would do anyway because, you know, they're going on holiday, but they make sure to be out of here and board things up because there are just tens of thousands of people and the police couldn't control the situation. If they wanted to vandalize things, break in there, people are sort of renting out rooms to just come and stay and be up high and see the parade. It moves very, very, very slowly. But you got some idea of the very plush houses. Very well appointed, okay? Handsome looking and spacious. So set you back a few £1 million. This is it. This is more of Portobello Road, but here there's nothing special. It's just houses, no more shops. The real Portobello Road is the other end. If we go back to it, I've just come from there. That's the real Portobello Road. Okay, so you've got the idea. That is enough from Portobello Road. Worth visiting. Not top on your priority of things to see in London, but certainly a little bit different, not dull. And if you've got money burning a hole in your pocket, I'm sure you can lighten your load by buying some rubbish down here.